I'm talking about my grandfather who lived from 1889 to 1967. And the first picture I want to show you was him at the New York World's Fair in 1940. And that's Joe DiMaggio on the right. The next slide is picture on the left of him is Annapolis midshipman, and he was in charge of drilling and monitoring the incoming fleets who were new at Annapolis. And the picture on the right that's Admiral Stark on the far right. I'm not sure who the man in the middle is, and that's my grandfather on the left. He was in charge. Well, first of all, I want to hopefully you can adopt the viewpoint of making some sort of sacrifice in your life, and unfortunately war is last ditch effort for a lot of sacrifice. There were about 1 million Russians that died and 1 million other French and British people that died, and definitely the very last thing you could do besides diplomacy. But as you know, we tried diplomacy and that failed. So this is the Mulberry Harbor was an artificial harbor that was designed and brought by the British to the Normandy beaches. And these are the pictures of the artificial harbors. One on the lower right is they're being built. And also I want to mention that Winston Churchill, this was his pet project, and he actually designed a lot of the things that were in the Mulberry Harbors. He designed the anchors that were they're called key anchors that were solidified during the landings and afterwards. And so about 1 million tons of food and equipment were offloaded during their days after June 6, 1944, in the space of 6 months, I think. And 1.5 million men were offloaded into off these bridges and artificial harbors. You can see the remnant. If you go to France today, you'll see those remnants of the artificial harbors that were, unfortunately, knocked around during storms. And let's see, next slide is him at this is a Potsdam conference, and I'm not sure the person on the right hand side, obviously another admiral, but I'm not sure who that is. And this is the picture on the right is the unloading of jeeps and tanks through the British. This is the British side of the Normandy landings. You notice that the blimps up there to keep the enemy airplanes out of the way. And that's pretty much all I have to say about that. There wasn't too much documents available except that there was one book called The Far Shore by Daniel Ellsberg, and he wrote about the Normandy landings and the Mulberry Harbors. And I want to mention a special mention to Captain Dayton Clark, who is probably one of the most underrated and not spoken of very much, but he was intrinsic into the development of the mulberries. And also I want to mention there are many men that besides my grandfather, that dedicate their lives and sacrifice their lives to the forming and the building of these mulberries. And this is one of the most no one really understands this until a few months ago, that these were built. And if you look at The Longest Day or other movies, they don't mention any of this, but this is intrinsic to the development of the toward the ending of the war. And it would have saved, it probably saved a few million American lives. And this is a picture of my grandfather. And actually, if you look at the graves in the background, the white, those are the astronauts that died in the Challenger disaster. I thought we'd bring that up. And so I thought that I really want to express my appreciation for all they did and for all of the people who sacrificed themselves during the war.
Chris, you are giving your number 9 speech, and this is so exciting because you're one speech away from becoming a competent communicator, which in my experience was a bit of a misnomer, because when I finished my 10th speech, I did not feel like I was competent at all. That's why I kept doing it again and again, and one of these days I'll get it right. But the purpose of your number 9 speech, Testament to Freedom, is to persuade with power. The objective of this speech is to persuade your audience about something, and in the description of the project they say you should use not only logic and reason, but also emotion. In other words, appeal to our emotions as well as our head about that. And you had some elements of this that I thought were very appropriate to that, and I like the way you presented it. For example, the connection between your personal history via your grandfather and some of these elements in history, such as D-Day, and in particular the D-Day landing and the Mulberry Artificial Harbor, which is actually a very important element that we often don't hear about. There's a podcast I listen to called Stuff You Missed in History Class, and I love it. And this is an element, I haven't heard about this artificial harbor, but you made such an important point about how we always hear about D-Day and that's glorified in the movies, but if it weren't for this harbor, as you pointed out, then the whole operation might not have been a success, because they wouldn't have been able to get enough men, enough materials, and support for that. So that was terrific. Your slides were very well constructed. I'm a big opponent of death by PowerPoint and eye charts with lots of words. You had big pictures, and they supported what you did. Now, since this is a number 9 speech, I will be a little bit more suggestive of things that you could have done, that really starting with the objective of the project. I wasn't clear what it was you were persuading us about, and I think you had some elements about that. There were really 2, and I would have picked one. One had to do with sacrifice, and that was the personal connection with both the men and women in the D-Day, and as well as your grandfather. So that was one thing you could have persuaded us a little bit more about, is to make a sacrifice for something bigger than yourself. The second could have been the harbor itself. See, in terms of D-Day, everybody thought that they were going to go to Pas-de-Calais, because not only was it shorter, but there was actually a harbor there that they could have used. And the creativity in creating this artificial harbor that was able to provide support for a major operation was rather significant. So I think you could have persuaded us about one of those 2. Pick one. For your number 10 speech, I would like to see some clarity about what it is you're inspiring us about, because you have so much material and so much that you can inspire us about, and I would really like to see that focused in that effort of inspiring us and organize to support that, and especially emotion. I think that's something where appeal to our higher values and our emotions, and I very much look forward to that. Madam President.